often God will talk to me as an encourager of encouragers. And I realized like when I operate in that identity, when I
Hmm.
put my focus on that, especially as an entrepreneur, like I'm kind of unstoppable. I have energy, I have
Yeah.
creativity, all of that. But when I start to veer, right? And sometimes I'll veer because of comparison. I'll see somebody else and be like, oh boy, I should be doing that. Or I'm not as far as they are. Or I'm not as big as they are. Or I might not have as much money as they have, or whatever. And I start to veer.
Yeah.
That's when I start to get scared. That's when I start to get distracted. That's when I start to get tired. That's when I start to feel overwhelmed. But
Mhm.
man, if I can come back to my identity of encourager of encouragers, and I'm not doing it for love, whatever that thing is, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a conversation, whether it's a coaching session, whether it's a blog post or an email, whatever. If
Yeah.
I'm doing that in that identity and doing it from love, not for love, unstoppable.
Mitch, you're a husband, father, success coach, host of two podcasts, Dream, Think, Do, and Encouraging the Encouragers, where you've talked with Brendan Bouchard, Lewis Howes, John Acuff, some of my personal heroes there, so many more. I'm excited and honored to have you on the show, man. Thank you for your time.
It is an honor. I love what you're doing, Eric, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
Come on. I love to kick the show off by going back a bit. As I was reading through your bio there, you've got an awesome childhood and upbringing there, starting at 12 years old. But like, what was childhood like for you? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Newton, Iowa,
Okay.
which is truly one of those towns in the Hallmark Christmas movies.
Okay.
Like it was one of those things. We had a courthouse in the literal middle of the town. Maytag, the classic washer dryer company, was built there. So it was a town really designed by engineers. So
Come on.
it is just classic, little storefronts all the way around that courthouse. And it just kind of the town grew up from there. It was a great little town to grow up in. And yeah, wildly blessed.
Come on. As I was reading through your website there, you talked about going to a sales seminar when you were 14 years old. Man, I wish I had that prompting. But like, what prompted you to
Right.
take that step into
Well, so
sales
it's
at your
funny
point?
is I was an extreme kid. I
Okay.
still am an extreme person, but I was an extreme kid. So I fell in love with bicycles.
Okay.
I always say, bicycles. I'm specific about bicycles because I wasn't cool enough to be into motorcycles. So when I
Okay.
say bikes, it's bicycles, right?
Yeah.
Like 10 speed Schwinn's, all that stuff. I fell in love with bicycles and then I fell in love with there was a one small bike shop in our town. It was Marty Schwinn Cyclery. It was 2 blocks off of that picturesque square. We
Yeah.
were in a hole in the wall building. We were right next to the Goodwill and the only strip club in town. So for a 12-year-old, it was the place to be, right?
Come
Like the
on.
smell of WD-40 permeated everything. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. And I just fell in love with bikes and then the bike shop and then the bike shop owner and I just started to basically stalk him that summer. I did everything that I could so that they
Yeah.
wouldn't, have me arrested for loitering. I wiped down bikes. I swept out the alley behind the shop. I painted trash cans. I mowed his lawn without his permission, like all sorts of stuff. And at the end of that summer, he and his wife Sherry decided to hire me, which I
Okay.
think they were probably debating: have him arrested for loitering or hire him. Let's hire him.
Right.
And they hired me at 13.
Come on.
And they very quickly figured out I had a knack for talking and selling bikes. They also very quickly figured out I was not good at fixing bikes. So they're like, let's get this kid selling bikes. And that was my focus early on. So Marty sent me to a Schwinn selling school.
Okay.
And, here I am, 14 years old, sitting with a bunch of middle aged bike shop owners. They're
Yeah.
like, what's the kid doing here? But yeah, that guy walked in and started talking about sales and the psychology of sales and how people learn and how people are either open to new ideas or shut down new ideas. And I'm like, what is this science? This is amazing.
Yeah.
And just fell in love with it. It changed my life.
Come on. Do you remember
Yeah.
something that was said like during that you like have still used today?
Well, I can remember I was not great in school, Eric.
Okay.
Like I was solidly like if I got a B minus, my parents were like, "Hey,
Yeah.
great job. It's a good day. We're in the B's. We're gonna take it." Real.
Yeah.
And this guy walks in to this selling seminar and starts teaching. And what I love is I can't necessarily remember specific things that he taught,
Mhm.
but I remember the way that he taught. And
Yeah.
I remember him getting like we were hands on, experiential. He invited us into the process, and something just literally came alive in me. I learned later he was using Socratic method. I
Okay.
wound up again being an extreme child. I fell in love with medieval history, so I decided to go and live in England
Come on.
when I turned 18. I lived
Yeah.
there for a year and took a medieval history class. I also took an American history class, which was fascinating. Their take on the American Revolution very different than
Oh, I'm
ours,
sure.
right? Yeah, but
That's
the
awesome.
the English teach with a Socratic method most often, and I just learned like talking through whatever you're working on and reaching logic through conversation, all those things that just lit me up.
Yeah.
And so yeah, in that selling seminar I just realized like he's not going for brain knowledge here, he's going for heart knowledge
Mm.
first, and
Yeah.
then the brain knowledge can come. And so yeah, it just changed me.
Come on. I mean, you talked about like you moving to England, and I know as like as humans, we have our own sort of ideas of at times to start and go down certain paths or the wrong
Yeah.
path, right? But like, is there a moment for you where your faith walk, where you clearly just felt God like redirect your path, and how did you respond to that?
Well, that like numerous times because I'm not the fastest learner. Again, B minus was a celebration, Eric, right?
Sure.
So like
Yeah.
I love how God is gracious, and it's interesting. My wife and I teach a prayer class at our church. My wife heads up the prayer ministry at our church, and I just love prayer. So I help her. It's a 2 year class, and recently we had people walk through just pray through
Mhm.
people that had an impact on their faith journey.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. Like we had people just crying, thinking back through, just one conversation or one individual, or, and that God brings a lot of what we need through people at different times.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might be a 5 minute conversation, sometimes it might be a 5 year relationship, friendship, whatever. But in that, and interestingly enough, I was thinking about this conversation. I thought of a youth pastor that wasn't even at my church. My church, we went to a small church in Newton. It was a great church, but I was the only kid that was my age. So we really didn't have a youth program.
Okay.
Opal Schneider, God bless her. I think she was 150. She was in charge of me year to year as a kid, which was awesome. And Opal was great. But again, she was about 150. So we rocked the flannel graphs.
Okay.
But I wound up being at a youth event, and this youth pastor from the church down the street saw me probably hanging by myself because I wasn't there with anybody. And he said, "Come to my office on Wednesday at 3." I'm like, "Why? And who are you?" Like I was
Right. Yeah.
aware of him, but and I'm like, I don't know. Hey, I think about it now. I look back on that and go, like, would they frown on that kind of approach now? I don't know. But he was like,
Sure.
show up in my office 3 o'clock on Wednesday. So I rode my bike up to his office,
Come on.
church down the street. I knew where it was. And Eric, this is how much of a geek I was. I walked into his office and I could have cared less about God.
Yeah.
But his name was Stan Weirson. And I walk into his office, never been in there before. And I turn the corner and there is a picture of him and Roy Rogers and Dale Evans.
Wow.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I didn't know we were going to talk about Jesus, but I'm like, can we talk about Roy Rogers? Like, how did that picture come about? Like, they were
Yeah.
old friends and all this kind of stuff. So I'm like,
Oh wow.
all right, I'll talk to you about whatever you want. Just tell me more about Roy Rogers. And so he started mentoring me week after week and didn't even talk about Jesus
Wow.
initially. Just started to talk to me about me.
Yeah.
And I look back on that. He encouraged me to, he actually kind of cajoled me into singing a solo at a summer camp. Like I was not a singer. I'm like,
Come
this
on.
is insane. He's like, I believe you can do it. I didn't know that he was prophetically speaking into me back then. I was, a scared kid. I was kind of introverted. I was extreme, but I was kind of introverted and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
Stan saw something in me and he started to speak into me and encourage me.
Mm.
And before I even knew it, all of a sudden I was in love with Jesus. I just didn't quite know like how that worked. Like he never did the I have to accept Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior. Like we never did the conversation thing. I
Sure.
just all of a sudden found myself riding my bike to Gosling's Christian bookstore and
Okay.
buying myself a Bible
Wow.
because I'm like, I got to know more about this guy.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
it's one of those things where I look back and, I have 62 different Bibles and, love different translations and all that stuff.
yeah.
My journey, like yours has definitely taken some different roads. I had about a
Mm.
decade where I didn't go to church.
Mhm.
We were in Montana. I felt like church was in the mountains, which there's some argument for God created those beautiful mountains, but
Sure.
I just didn't go to church for about a decade. But
Yeah.
he welcomed me back,
Come on.
and I was always praying, I was always talking to him, but
Yeah.
there is something about being a community and all those things. So yeah, I mean the countless different people, different conversations that God used and worked through to just continue to remind me He adores me
Yeah.
and that I'm one of his favorites, just like you're one of his favorites. And
Come on.
everyone that's listening, you are one of his favorites. And don't worry about how that works. Just know that it's true. He
Yep.
loves you and you are one of his favorites.
So good, man. And throughout the years, as you being a coach and talking with speakers and content
Yeah.
creators, like you've seen a lot of success, but like, how has your relationship with Jesus shaped the way that you like see or define success, especially in this world now where everything is like physical and measures success much differently than I would say Christian men do.
Right. Well, I am an ongoing project.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like I would
Yep.
love to say, Eric, God showed me this a decade ago and I've never had a problem since. You know what I
Right. Yeah.
mean? It's
Totally.
like this is a daily choice kind of conversation here.
Yep.
But I look at it and I don't know about you, but if I was in charge of writing the Bible, right? Or like at least deciding which books go in, there would be
Yeah.
a lot of stories I probably would have pulled
Mhm.
because you're like the Israelites. Come on, guys. Like, how many times did God pull off a miracle? They're like, God, you're amazing. You saved us. And then 3 hours later, they're like, kind of thirsty right now. 6 hours later, kind of hungry right now,
Yeah.
kind of tired, could use my bed again, all that stuff. Right. And I'm like, I am so grateful that God, in his infinite wisdom, and the people that put the Bible together,
Yeah.
in their infinite wisdom, they kept those stories in because there are days where I'm like, those Israelites are such idiots. And
Yeah.
then 2 hours later, I'm like, I am such an Israelite. Like, oh my gosh. Like, I'd be praising God at 7 a.m. for some revelation. And by noon, I'm like, God, you've forgotten me.
Right.
Where are you, God? Right. So it is a daily thing for me.
Yeah.
Maybe someday it won't be, but it is a daily choice,
Mm.
especially because, like, I know when you look at the things that the Israelites faced, and you looked at the things the disciples faced in the early church, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we have our challenges. There is no doubt. And I think some of the challenges are truly unique to our generation. Like, we have
Sure.
never had a generation that is more bombarded than our current generation. Like every generation faces its challenges,
Sure.
but we can literally say there have never been more organizations vying for our attention and
Mm.
finding ways to pull our attention than any generation before us
Yeah.
ever.
Come
Right.
on.
Like, so this, it's always been an important conversation, but it's probably never been more important because it is an intentional daily choice to stay in conversation with God.
Yeah.
And like knowing to the best of your ability, like what is my identity in God?
Mm.
Not, not to say, like I always say, God has called me a lot of things and they're always loving, they're always kind. But like in this current season, often God will talk to me as an encourager of encouragers. And I realized like when I operate in that identity, when I
Mhm.
put my focus on that, especially as an entrepreneur, like I'm kind of unstoppable. I have energy, I have
Yeah.
creativity, all of that. But when I start to veer, right? And sometimes I'll veer because of comparison. I'll see somebody else and be like, oh boy, I should be doing that. Or I'm not as far as they are, or I'm not as big as they are, or I might not have as much money as they have, or whatever. And I start to veer.
Yeah.
That's when I start to get scared. That's when I start to get distracted. That's when I start to get tired. That's when I start to feel overwhelmed. But
Mm.
man, if I can come back to my identity of encourager of encouragers, and I'm not doing it for love, whatever that thing is, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a conversation, whether it's a coaching session, whether it's a blog post or an email, whatever. If
Yeah.
I'm doing that in that identity and doing it from love, not for love, unstoppable. And
Oh,
if I'm in that, we've never had a financial problem.
yeah.
Usually it's when I try to get out ahead of God or when I'm operating out of fear of scarcity, that's where we've gotten into trouble in the past. But man, when
Mm.
I operate in that identity, God doesn't remove all the problems, but oh my gosh, he makes us unstoppable
Yeah.
when we're in that space.
Man. Yeah, it's so important to have that intentional time with God. And for
Yeah.
me, it's really starts at the moment I open my eyes and I immediately
Yeah.
say out loud, like, Jesus, thank you for another day that I get to see and hug and hold my family. And for
Right.
me, that's win number one. And then I make my bed and there's two wins in 15 seconds. And my brain's already firing up like, man, we got two
Yep.
wins. Now it's going to continue to
Yep.
go on. And I had a pastor on my show a while back, and he told me something that was really life altering for me. But he said, before I do anything, before I look at my phone, I look at Instagram, Facebook, check email, I spend my time with God. And I
Yeah.
realized that I was like, before I was having this quiet time, I was scrolling through Facebook and Instagram and all this stuff.
Yep.
And I just like gave this covenant to God, said, man, God, I'm not going to open my phone until I've had my quiet time with you. And
Yep.
so immediately after I get up to my office, I'm turning on worship music, and I started
Yep.
reading the Bible from the beginning again last year, and
Yep.
reading through the book of Job right now is where I'm at. But
Wow.
spending time reading the word every day, and then I read a proverb that's aligned with a date every day, but really spending time in prayer. And that's just been a game changer to do that
That's
before I jump
huge.
into social media and emails and
Yep.
all that other
Yep.
stuff, man.
I love that. I love that. And I think that for you, like that is an act of obedience, right? But it's also like if you start the day with a great conversation with your wife, by supper, you're going to have a better supper. You know what I mean? It's kind of
Totally.
that
Yeah.
thing of like, it just makes sense,
Yeah.
right? And I think some people, when they look at a practice like that and they do it out of obligation, like,
Mhm.
I got to check this off my to-do list, like got to read the Bible before I do anything else,
Yeah.
then like it could produce some good fruit because the
Sure.
Bible is amazing, right?
Yeah.
But if you go, wait, I want to talk to dad, I want to talk to papa
Yeah.
before I do anything else, and he actually is looking forward to talking with me,
Mhm.
right? Like that changes everything to go, wait, like I believe that God wants to meet us in that morning time. 'Cause I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Mine because I am who I am, it has to be infused with caffeine. Like
Yep.
I
Totally.
like God gave us the coffee bean, so
Right.
I'm going to use it, right? Like that is a form of worship, is a
Yes.
really good cup of coffee,
I
right?
agree.
But to also like it's that thing of I used to ask people, what do you think about when you think about how God thinks about you?
Mm.
I'll say it
Yeah.
again. What do you think about when you think about how God thinks about you?
Yeah.
Because that will really impact whatever, if it's a morning session, if it's a noon session, if it's an evening session, like how you think about God thinking about you really matters. Because are you thinking that God's thinking, Erik, I can't freaking wait to talk. Get in here,
Yeah.
buddy. I
Totally.
got some stuff for you, right?
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
whole different quiet time than I need to appease
Mm.
a angry God who was just waiting to zap me.
Right. Oh,
Like that's an entirely different session.
yeah. Game
And
changer.
I would say like, yeah, right. And it's that thing of being able to say, okay, all right, I am actually meeting with a God who could, create the evergreen tree and eyeball like the world And yet he is excited to meet with me in my quiet time. That's incredible.
Yeah.
But then also not that, like the other part of that I think is mind boggling. And I'm so glad we don't have to understand it to know that it can be true, is that he does want to meet us in that quiet time, but he also wants to meet us when we're driving to the grocery store.
Totally.
And when we're in that meeting, right? Or when we're dealing with that client that's especially problematic right now.
Right.
Like God's like, hey, you know what? I don't just want to talk to you in the quiet time. I love that time, but let's talk. I want to talk with you about that client.
Yeah.
You know, it's, my coaching, I do a lot of success coaching, and not all of my clients are Christians. Not all of them have a faith that they talk about, or, you know, that's an important part of their life.
Right.
But I'll tell most of my clients, I'll say, hey, I pray before every call. And if you want, I'll wait and I'll pray with you. And if that's not your brand of vodka, then I'll just, I'll pray before our session. And most people are like, I'll try it. You know, or like, no, prayer's really important. I love it. And I'll never forget, I was praying for, I mostly work with entrepreneurs and executives and founders. I was talking with a really successful entrepreneur, and faith was somewhat important, but I think she was probably in that category of God's waiting to smite me, all these kinds of things.
Sure.
And so I prayed, and as I was praying for her, as I often would do, I prayed for her business, but I start by praying for her marriage and her family. And I said, and Lord, bless her home. And I felt this nudge, just that, like, not the, clouds part and the sun shone, thus saith the Lord. But I just felt this nudge, pray for her homes.
Wow.
Plural, not singular.
Yeah.
And so I stopped and I said, oh yeah, Lord, bless her homes. And we were on Zoom, and she had closed her eyes because I think she thought that's what she had to do in order to get reception or whatever. And she opened her eyes like, what? And then I prayed for her business and I prayed for her call. And then we get done and she goes, how do you know? And I said, how do I know what?
Yeah.
And she said, well, my husband and I bought a second property last night, kind of our dream property. And I have been wondering, what does God think ever since we signed the deal? I've been wondering, what does God think? And I said, well, he told me to bless it, so I think he's good with it. And she just started crying. It was just like, just so cool, right?
Yeah.
So God wants to talk to us in our quiet time. You know this, right? But he wants to be talking to us all the time.
All the time.
He's not limited by anything.
Yeah.
We're limited by all sorts of stuff. He's not limited by anything. So yeah, I love it.
Man. Like I mentioned, you are the host of two amazing podcasts, Dream, Think, Do, and Encouraging Encouragers. For those who don't or haven't listened to the show, they need to get on it right now. Like, people that listen to this show, go check out those podcasts, please, because you will not be disappointed, I promise. But I'd love to ask, I love talking with other podcasters, but what's your favorite part of podcasting, and how has it impacted just you as a person or your business?
Yeah. Well, I can say, I am so grateful for the generation we've been born into, right?
Yeah.
Like, we got our problems, but I love air conditioning. I love indoor plumbing. I really do. I know there's stuff that future generations will have that we don't have, and that's cool. But I really, really am grateful for a lot of the stuff we have.
Yeah.
But I am so grateful for podcasting, because it allows people like you and me, right? I don't know about you, but I used to try to bring value through blogging, and I can write, but boy, does it take me a long time.
Sure. Yeah.
Whereas with a podcast, boy, I can think through what I want to say, put some notes together, and then just go deliver it, because then I can just talk it out. Yeah. But I always say, everybody should have a podcast, because it is the best excuse to reach out to interesting people and have conversations.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, if only 8 people, 4 people, if just your mom listens to your podcast, it's still worth it, because you're able to have these amazing conversations with people and get to ask the kinds of questions that you want to ask. I mean, I know, for you with your MMA, your first podcast, you just wanted to ask the question, why do you guys get in the cage? You were going to get pounded. You were going to pound somebody. Why do you get in this cage? And I know everybody answered that question differently, but like that's a
Totally.
fascinating question. And when you think about, when you see people that are doing inspiring things, curiosity inspiring things, like, and if there's any part of you, it's like, why do they do that? Or boy, I'd love to talk with them about that. Start a freaking podcast and then
Yeah.
reach out to them. And it's the ultimate excuse to have great conversations.
So good, man. And some of my best friends today are people that I've had on my podcast or I've been on their podcast and I've known them for 5 years, but I've never met them in person. Like such a great relationship
It's crazy.
builder,
Yep.
for
Yeah, it is.
podcasting.
It's amazing. I'll tell a fun story. My sixth interview for Dream Think Do, I interviewed a guy named Antonio Neves. And we just instantly bonded. It was one of those where I've, really connected with a lot of the people I interviewed, but that one was just extra special. And then we wound up speaking at a conference. We were both at the same conference like a month and a half later.
Oh, wow.
And it was crazy because we had this great conversation and then we're like hanging out for a whole weekend. And on the way back from a dinner, we both, both of us are introverts, so we snuck out,
Sure.
and we were walking back to the hotel. We wound up having this really important conversation about him and his girlfriend at the time and whether he should propose and all that stuff. And fast forward a couple of weeks, he proposed to that amazing girl. And then fast forward a couple of weeks, and they reached out to me for a Zoom call and they asked me to officiate their wedding. And
Come
so
on.
like, I mean, and we have our lives intertwined and so many amazing high points, low points, all of that. And it's all because of a freaking podcast interview.
Right. Come on. That's so good,
Yep.
dude.
Yep.
I mean, you coach amazing people, like I said, from speakers to content creators. Just curious, like, what's one mindset shift that you believe really every entrepreneur business person needs to make in order to make a big impact?
Yeah, I love it. Well, there is a version of this that applies to everyone. But I think it's even more important as you think about God
Yeah.
and your relationship with God. And I alluded to it earlier. I didn't know you were going to ask this question, but I alluded to it earlier. Is when we can do things from love, not
Yep.
for love,
Mhm.
it changes everything.
Totally.
And I know that might even sound trite. I don't know. But I know for me, and I say that from experience because there have been seasons where I have done what I do, whether it was working at the bike shop as a kid or selling pharmaceuticals,
Yeah.
early in my career, getting promoted, all those things. Whenever I was doing it for love, my success was short lived and shallow.
Mhm.
When I was doing it from love, my success, what's beautiful about it is sometimes, some of my greatest successes didn't actually bring a huge financial breakthrough, but it
Sure.
brought maybe some of the most enriching, powerful experiences I've ever had. Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
And at the same time, sometimes, because I do believe that God has us, especially that's why I love your podcast, is that, people like us, people that are listening, we are actually missionaries in the biggest mission field on the planet. If you are an entrepreneur, if you are in the workplace, if you're, doing a job for an organization, you are a missionary in the biggest mission field on the planet. Like some people think, to be a missionary, I've got to go to Africa or I've got to go to a developing nation or
Yeah.
whatever. It's like, nah, you are in the marketplace. We are in the biggest mission field on the planet. And so I always say, like, first, deliver excellence,
Mhm.
right? Be innovative, bring your best work, serve, love people well. And what's wild about that is when we do it from love, not for love, we will often make a huge impact.
Yeah.
But what you'll also see a lot of the times is when people are doing it from love, not for love, those people often also are promoted. Those people
Mhm.
are loved. Those people are celebrated because people really feel good around those people. People really feel inspired by those people. Those people often, like, as Jesus people, as faith-based people, like, we should be coming up with the best ideas
Yeah.
because we're talking to a creator God who, designed the flippin' eyeball, right? Like
Right.
if we have, direct communication with a God that can design, so many things, like we should be coming up with the best ideas. And we
Totally.
don't always have to say, God gave me this.
Right.
Jesus told me this. Like, don't be weird, right?
Right.
Bring excellence. And then when people ask you, then, I mean, Paul talks about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
when people ask you, be able to talk about your faith in a non-weird way. And a lot of times people will be like, okay, I don't quite get it, but I think I want 2 scoops of it.
Yeah. People need to stop making Jesus weird. Like, and so like, and we're at where we're at in Idaho, and it's been a struggle for us to find a good solid church that didn't make Jesus
Yep.
weird. We go
Yep.
into a church and they have
It's
flaggers waving in the corner. I'm like, why do we have flaggers during worship? I don't understand.
I have a dent in my skull from a flagger, for crying out loud, man. And she looked at me. She literally whacked me in the forehead and
No
then
way.
looked at me with disdain, like, you got in the way of my Holy Spirit flag. I'm like, here I am, big welt, bleeding, all this stuff. So
Right.
yeah, I'm like, hey, if you need a flag, go for it. That's awesome. Just
Yeah.
don't be weird.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. Oh, Mitch, I absolutely love this conversation, man. You're an absolute world changer. Thank you for jumping on the show and talking about from love, not for love, man. And
Yeah.
just such a cool concept there. And man, thank you so much, Mitch. I love this episode. I love this conversation. It's going to impact a ton of people, man. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And thank you for the work that you're doing, man. I'm going to continue to pray because I think you are already impacting a huge tribe of people, but I just see that snowball. It's rolling down the hill, man. And you are just agreeing with God and saying yes. And yeah, I'm just excited. It's an honor to get to be a part of what you're doing, man.
Hey, if you've ever thought about starting a podcast but unsure where to go, you need to go check out erikallenmedia.com. Click on the resources tab there. I will walk you through how to start, launch, and run a podcast. I've recorded over 500 interviews since 2017, and I want to help you launch your podcast. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button so you catch every show when I drop them. Thanks again. Keep changing the world.